With 4 races to go, our 2 title rivals are separated by just 19 points, with Mercedes and Red Bull separated by just 1 point. Max really did hit Mercedes and Lewis with a hammer blow in Mexico with a dominant win, and now going into Brazil, it really does feel like the next few races are must win for Lewis to keep the title alive. Although Mercedes have had their highlight races this season, it does feel that when looking back over the entirety of 2021, it's Red Bull who have produced a better car, and that's why deservedly so Max is currently looking to seal his first world title. Having said that, Lewis Hamilton did not become a 7-time world champion by crumbling and folding under the pressure just when his title rival starts turning up the heat. Even though it is starting to feel like maybe the championship is slipping away, I have no doubt that after everything we've seen in this crazy 2021 season, there is still plenty of twists and turns still to come. This video is actually going to be a little bit different from the norm because to discuss all of these topics and more in the closing stages of this epic championship fight, I invited Jess, who many of you might know from the Motorsport Network. Now, this is going to be a longer form, almost basically a podcast type video, but let me know if you do enjoy these kind of longer style videos with other creators. But anyway, let's get into this one. So Jess, back on the channel. It's been a very long time, over a year, but yeah, glad to have you back on and talking a bit of championship talk with Lewis and Max.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me back. Has it really been a year? That's
over a year. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's crazy. But no, yeah, thanks for having me back. And yeah, I mean, what a season we've had in the time that since I was last on the channel. It's been a hot one, let's just say. Lots of stuff to talk about, lots of stuff still going on, and we're so far into the season now. So that's it's what the fans want, right? It's what we all want, to be able to see a championship battle going down to it. Or is it? Is it all about to change? I guess that's what we're going to get onto.
I mean, this season has already been so unpredictable, but as we're recording this right now, I mean, it is right after the Mexican Grand Prix, just before the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Mexico really did seem like a sizable win for Max and Red Bull. I mean, we kind of expected them to be, you know, to have the strong package and kind of be where they were, but what did you think about their level of dominance and also just in the race? I mean, even Checo, how close he was to Lewis. So what did you think about how strong they looked?
Yeah, I think, as you said, we expected this. Mexico has always been a Red Bull track in inverted commas. I mean, I know a lot of people get a bit upset when you try and say that a certain track is fit for a certain team, especially this season where we've seen both teams perform where we thought they might, they shouldn't be. So I think that has been basically the narrative of this season, which has been great. But I think obviously Red Bull was shocked by Mercedes in qualifying. And whether we want to go into the whole Sonoda Gate around that particular session or not, they were out of position for the start of the race, but it actually ended up being a bit of a godsend for Max in the end. And as we know, Mexico is not a place where you tend to win from pole position. In fact, since 2017, no driver's ever won from pole position. So it was a bit of a shock on Saturday, a bit of an anomaly, but I think, as you said, like the race on Sunday just showed how much performance that Red Bull has, not only just this season, but in those altitudes, running that package where they are, and just Mexico is a bit of a home for Red Bull in terms of results. So yeah, very tight, very close. It was, if anything, it's almost a bit. We don't want those races where like Max is just absolutely out in the clear, and it's kind of where we're used to seeing Lewis running, you know, very comfortably ahead and not really getting much of a challenge. But as you said, Checo did provide a challenge, but Mexico's a track where you can't overtake very easily. So even though it was very exciting in watching him chase down Lewis, I mean, it was like going back to the 39 laps of watching Bottas trying to get around Ricciardo, which just felt like we had that on loop. And the fact that the TV directors had nothing else to cut to kind of again showed you what kind of a race we saw in Mexico. But I think whilst it was really interesting to watch Checo claw Lewis in, I was very much like, he's not going to pass because, again, like, it's Lewis Hamilton. Even if he is maybe not in the fastest car, his racecraft, his defending, he's incredibly good. And I think he was very... what was your thoughts on the post-race interview with Lewis? Because very often he likes to make out like, oh, that was the toughest challenge of my life. That was the hardest. Monaco. I'm thinking back to Monaco. Was it 2019 when he had Max behind him and he was like, oh, that was the hardest race of my life. And it's like, but it's Monaco. Like, he's not going to overtake you if you've got track position. Like, it's Monaco. But this time in Mexico, he was very much like, it wasn't a problem. I wasn't worried about Checo. And I couldn't work out if that was a psychological thing. Like, was he playing games? Or was he genuinely like, well, he wasn't going to get around me?
It was really interesting because after the race, I feel like some people kind of... I knew what he meant, but I feel like some people almost twisted his words, because what he meant is that if Sergio Perez is genuinely able, and I know that we're obviously at altitude, so it's kind of a little bit different, but they're still dirty air. If Checo is able to be within a second and a half of Lewis for lap after lap, I mean, I think that's what he meant in terms of, could you imagine what Max would have done if he was behind Lewis? So that's why I think, like, even though Max didn't make a great start and he was ahead, even if Lewis did come out of turn 1 in P1, I still think it would have been Max's race. So I think that's what he meant. But yeah, I think he knows that was a big blow, because it's not just getting beaten by Red Bull, it's the gap. It's seeing how close Checo was to him, it's seeing how far Max was up the road. But yeah, I think Lewis, he does also, quite a lot of times just say, the car just wasn't there. And we know that it's not there, but maybe in a way psychologically it kind of helps him to think that, next time out, if we have the car, I'm going to be able to beat him. But yeah, I mean, how did you read him after the race?
I think there's a definite, for me at least, there's been such a swing after Mexico. And to be honest, I actually felt the swing after the US Grand Prix. That was almost, to use a different sporting analogy, was like break point for Red Bull. Like, if we're going to talk about tennis terminology, that race was Lewis Hamilton's to win and Mercedes to win, and they didn't. And I think that was a major blow. And we're running out of races now in the season where it's so close between the two of them that it's going to come down to the psychological impact of being on the back foot in terms of Lewis's case. Like, we're not talking about, I hope it doesn't come down to anything like DNFs or anything like that. I think that's the only way, I know we're going to get onto this as well, but I think that's the only way that Lewis has any chance of winning this championship, is if Max doesn't finish a race. Or something happens that means that he's further back. Because the really, really interesting thing about this season is, if you look at the stats between Lewis and Max, I actually forgot kind of just how many DNFs Max has this season. He's had 3 DNFs and Lewis has had 1. So and I guess obviously the one that Lewis had was also with Max, so it kind of slightly balances out in that respect. But if you think about the gap, like, the gap could be way bigger than it is right now, which kind of shows you again, like, not just how far Red Bull have come, but just what a fighter Max Verstappen is in this championship, which is really exciting. But I really think it's going to take a lot for Lewis and Mercedes to claw this back. I think it is really advantage Max Verstappen. I just don't see where Mercedes are really going to have that comfortability of being over and above Red Bull. So obviously we've got some tracks that we've never gone to before, so we're not really sure about how either team is going to perform. So Saudi Arabia, big question mark. It's a street track, which you could say would maybe favour Mercedes. It really depends. You've got Qatar. Qatar is going to be all about pace. I think it's going to be a bit like Monaco, where it's going to be potentially won in qualifying. Track position is going to be major, but looks like it's going to be a really speedy track. So between the two of them, is that where Mercedes could claw some points back? Of course, you'd like to think so, but I just really think the momentum's been taken out of their sails a little bit. So I am fully anticipating that this is going to be a Max Verstappen Red Bull World Championship in both constructors and drivers championships. I just think that they will have the edge moving into the latter half, or the latter stages of the season. We're well into the second half, the latter stages of the season.
And again, you mentioned it right there, that word momentum. Now, what's really interesting is that Max, in kind of his classic style now, before, I think it was just before the Mexican Grand Prix, he said he doesn't really believe in momentum, which I found interesting, because I do believe in momentum, and I think that it is fully behind him. And I mean, although in 2021 everything seems to be going from race to race, it's like changing from race to race, but what have you thought about the mentality of Max in his first ever season of fighting for the title, and also Lewis as well, kind of going into these last 4 races?
It has genuinely been such an interesting play, because I think, again, we've been so used to the dominance of Lewis Hamilton and him really not having a proper challenger. I mean, I guess the closest we got was Vettel in 2018, but again, after Germany, sorry, Vettel fans, it just completely, the momentum, as we were talking about, just completely and utterly went. So it's interesting that Max says that he doesn't believe in that stuff, because I guess, if anything, could that be an advantage? Because Lewis definitely does. Like, Lewis fully believes in energy and attitude and getting in the right headspace. And I think he's very much a bigger picture. Whereas if Max can look at everything in isolation, I think that's one way to beat Lewis Hamilton. Look at 2016, Nico Rosberg clearly states and has said a lot, is that he won that on a psychological battle, not 100% on track. A lot of it was off track, and how he could play Lewis kind of to his weaknesses, which maybe is the psychological side. I mean, I'm by no means saying that Lewis Hamilton is psychologically weak. I think he is probably one of the most, like, the strongest drivers out there, but he does have a very emotional side. And I think, like, if Max can look at races in isolation, so if, for instance, taking Monza out of it, taking Silverstone out of it, taking Baku out of it, and not letting that get in his head, and just approach every race weekend as an individual event and just go, I'm just going to go out here and win, that could be an advantage. And it's just a completely different mental setup from what we've seen in Lewis Hamilton versus whomever is the closest to going up against him in recent years. So, and I guess on the flip side, what I've seen or what I've kind of gathered from Lewis is, and again, we're all doing this from just observing them through the TV. Unfortunately, I've not made it out to many races this season, thank you to the pandemic. But there does, I think, maybe not so much in Lewis, but in Mercedes. Mercedes aren't used to being on the back foot. And they're not used to having an external challenger. They're used to managing it internally. So I think that's also been a real narrative of the season, in that, how have they responded to that? Because they've almost had to go a bit more Red Bull. They've had to make, ballsy strategy calls, or calls that maybe are a bit risky, and we're not used to seeing them put out of sorts, but they've made mistakes this season. And we're not used to seeing that. Lewis Hamilton doesn't make mistakes, but we've seen a couple of enforced errors this season. So it's been really interesting to see that change from the previous dominance that we've seen. So yeah, I think it's really, really interesting to see how both the teams and the individual drivers have kind of shown their cards almost, and gone, like, this is who we are as racers. And whoever comes out on top, I'm really looking forward to kind of like going back through the season and kind of picking out those points. That's kind of what I do. I love to like look at the narratives of was that point, really, did that make any difference? Like, did that race, did that mistake, how are we going to move on from this? Because a lot of it has also come down to luck. That's Formula One, right? Yeah. Like, that's such a major part of Formula One as well. Max being able to go from the back of the grid to the podium when he took his engine penalty, and Mercedes not being able to do the same thing, that's all going to add to obviously the end result. So yeah, it's just been fascinating, genuinely fascinating.
And also, I suppose something else that's been amazing about 2021 is the number 2 drivers. And I mean, both of them are going to play big roles, especially in these last few races. But What have your thoughts been about both Valtteri and Checo, where they are at the moment relative to Max and Lewis? And also, who do you think is going to make actually the biggest difference in these last few races for the Drivers' Championship?
Well, never has the pressure maybe been so high on Valtteri Bottas. Because again, I think he doesn't like the label of wingman. And to be honest, has he been much of one this season? Again, like I guess both Checo and Valtteri have kind of been absent when actually the team and the two title contenders have really needed them. But all of a sudden, here we are, and we're talking about, Valtteri, since he's had his multi-year contract with Alfa Romeo, is looked like a completely different driver. I know he came out on the F1 podcast Beyond the Grid saying that actually that was really important for him, and that it's completely and utterly changed his psychology, and it's given him, he's got better headspace because he knows where he's going to be for the next few years. So that's been a really interesting change, because I know I'm kind of known on social or whatever for being a Bottas basher.
I do like to take poke at that sometimes. I do, to be fair. Sometimes when we talk, I do like to kind of just get it in there.
Get the knife in, well, you love Bottas, don't you? And I think the thing is as well is, like, clearly he's a very good driver. Like, most of the drivers on the grid, I'm going to keep this politically correct, most of the drivers on the grid are obviously very, very good drivers. You have to be to get behind F1 machinery, but not everybody can be a world champion. We know that. Like, it's just mathematically, it's not possible. And with the drivers that we've had through kind of recent years or whatever, the talent is insane. So you're talking about people like a Daniel Ricciardo, who I don't think anyone would say is a bad driver, but he's never going to have a sniff at a World Drivers' Championship. I don't think it's just kind of that is what it is. There's just so many, you've got Max Verstappen's, you've got Lewis Hamilton's for however long Lewis decides to continue racing for. So it's an interesting one. But Valtteri has always been like, yeah, a bit safe, bit like, all right. And he just hasn't delivered when he's needed to. Now, I will be the first one to say that luck has not been on his side. I think Mexico absolutely encapsulated. I don't know. I genuinely cringed at every single moment something went wrong. I was like, this guy, will he ever
pit
catch
stops
a
at
break?
the end. I mean, pit stop after pit stop, and then he's like battling with Max for the fastest lap. I mean, yeah, for sure. He's just.
I mean, I know the point for fastest lap hasn't been something that's been around for a long time, but I've never seen someone have to make 2 attempts to try and get that. So yeah, he's not had a lot of luck go his way. He's been inconsistent in his performance, and then he's had absolutely, Monza was a great weekend for him, bar the engine penalty. But even with the engine penalty, he ended up P3. So he's had moments. Yeah, he's had moments to shine, but it's a bit of a too little too late. And I would say similarly with Checo, but it's going to be really interesting to see, who can continue that into the last few races, because as you say, it's going to be, we've seen so many occasions where a team being able to put in play both drivers genuinely does win or lose you a race. Can you enforce a strategy call that is favourable to you? But I really hope that we have both drivers up there from each team to be able to have an all-out, this is getting serious. We're getting to the real pointy end of the season now. And it would be really rubbish if, for whatever reason, I don't know, like Checo doesn't qualify and Mercedes force Max Verstappen into an unfavourable strategy, and it's kind of like, well, he didn't have a chance. We want real racing, right? We want really good racing events where we see wheel-to-wheel action and people really gunning for it. I mean, don't get me, like, a strategy race is still interesting in its own right, but it's just not as exciting, is it, as being able to see people make, even if it is like, we're going to make this strategy call, like we're going to come into the pits now and we're going to do the undercut or the overcut or whatever it is, that we get to kind of see a fair fight it'd be really rubbish if it just didn't feel like a fair fight and it was down to the number 2 drivers just not being in position to make any contribution.
And I suppose, I mean, you did mention this a little bit earlier, but 4 races to go, 19 points between Max and Lewis, and only 1 point between Mercedes and Red Bull in the constructors. I mean, yeah, who's your money on for both of them? Because I feel like maybe towards that middle part of the season, Checo was kind of still getting used to the Red Bull. It did look like Mercedes were almost kind of in a really strong position to get that constructors, but he's just kind of really coming on at the right time. 3 podiums on the bounce as we're recording this. Who would you put your money on at the end of the season, last lap in Abu Dhabi for both of those?
Oh my god, imagine if it does come down to the last lap. That would be what a season, if that is what happens. Because I think Saudi Arabia is looking like the first, like where Max could win it. He could tie it up by Saudi
if we get there, and if we race there, by the way. Just
if we do, yeah. We've heard rumors of a double Abu Dhabi, but they seem really like even if the pit building's not ready and the teams have to kind of have makeshift garages, I think F1 wants to race in Saudi. So let's see what happens there. But yeah, I just think it's interesting with Checo as well, because obviously the cursed second Red Bull seat has been a narrative that's followed us for a few seasons now, or even longer. I guess, even when Ricciardo was there, it was the whole, well, this is Max's team and the second driver doesn't get a look in. But I guess the interesting thing with Checo is he is more mature. He's got way more seasons under his belt than we've had when they tried Gasly in the seat, Alex in the seat. So I think what Checo can do is, I think what he has done is turn around to Red Bull and is like, do you want me to even contribute to this championship? Because if you keep giving me a car built for Max Verstappen, I'm not going to give you results. So that's been a kind of point of difference, I guess, from where we've seen the more less experienced drivers. They want to perform. They want to prove that they can do it, and they maybe don't have that same level of ability to turn around and go, I can't do this. So that's been interesting, and yeah, if Checo can keep it up and Max just stays on his current run of form, I just don't see anything stopping him other than a DNF. So I genuinely do think that this is going to be a Red Bull season, and this is going to be a Max Verstappen season, unless we get something crazy like, yeah, Max gets taken out of the race and Lewis finishes the race. Because that's the thing, like, we can't have another coming together. It is a sprint weekend again this weekend.
2 in a row. Let's not forget, 2 in a row now.
Maths would say we're going to get another tasty coming together, but let's hope not for that, because that would be end of the road for Lewis. So he needs to keep his nose clean, which, he doesn't get himself into scrape, other than the 2 very famous incidents now this season.
Yeah.
We don't usually see him getting into scrapes. So yeah, I think genuinely for me, my gut feeling from what I know that we have kind of running into the last part of the season, I see very few opportunities for Mercedes to slow this down, even if the constructors, as you say, is so tight. I've just got a feeling this is Max and Red Bull's year.
Well, there you go. I mean, I think regardless of who wins it, both in the drivers and constructors, we've had a great 2021 season. I kind of want Lewis to win a few, because I do want to see a title showdown. After that, I really don't mind, because I feel like the narrative on both sides is amazing. Lewis to break the record in terms of outright having 8. Max Verstappen, we always knew, I mean, even from probably his first season, we knew that he was going to become a world champion, to become kind of the first new world champion really since Sebastian Vettel in terms of a non-Mercedes driver. I feel like both of them are absolutely worthy winners, but yeah, it's going to be a very, very exciting end to the season with those 4 races. 2 races that we don't even know, what they're going to be like in terms of Qatar and Saudi Arabia. There is so much going on. And then there's also 2022 for us as well. The brand new regs, so much to be excited about. I feel like Formula One, I don't want to jinx it, but I do feel like it's in a pretty good place at the moment.
Yeah, I genuinely agree with all those points. It's kind of one of those things where we're like, why are we changing the regs again? This season's been awesome. But I think if we're going to move on, because obviously, I mean, I know that we don't have... This isn't really the place to talk about this subject, but we do have an issue of we've got supremely talented drivers up and down the grid, but they're never going to get a look in, because we've got 2 dominant teams, and that's pretty much like one of those 4 drivers is gonna win, at least based on this season. So I guess what we're hoping for next season is that we only improve on that, and we have teams up and down the grid that can win races. So a Ocon winning in Hungary, which I genuinely forgot even happened this season.
Yeah.
It's been like, oh crap, yeah, Ocon won a race.
That's just like a little almost like footnote of this crazy season.
Or, you know, like a Gasly winning in Monza last year. It was, though, so hopefully, yeah, it won't be a footnote anymore. It will be a regular possibility. So yeah, I'm an optimist. I'm always going to see the good in everything. Even when we've had rubbish seasons, I've been like, yeah, but remember that race? That was epic. So yeah, I'm definitely going to keep my fingers crossed. And yeah, I mean, again, if your prediction of a last lap showdown for the win would just be the absolute crowning moment of 2021, which, considering everything that everybody's been through over the past kind of, 2 years, would just be such a great story for us to be able to look back and go, yeah, but didn't we do well? Like, didn't F1 do well? So yeah, we've got a lot to kind of, there's a lot of topics to be discussed in terms of how next season's going to work, like new regs, a grueling schedule, a grueling calendar. Like, how are we going to approach that? But if we're just focusing on what we've got right now in terms of a title battle, we're in pretty good shape.
We definitely are. Well, Jess, thank you so much for coming on. Again, it's been far too long. Hopefully I can get you on a little bit sooner at one point, maybe towards the end of the season. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Well, there you have it, another video wrapped up. Now, don't forget to let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below, and once again, a big thank you to Jess for coming on the channel. Now, if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to drop a like, and also smash that subscribe button to support the channel, and I will see you in the next one.